Hi there, welcome to ITV News Meridian.
Tonight's headlines where you are this Tuesday evening. A new record high, 1,300 migrants crossed the Channel in a single day. Men, women and children arriving in small boats along the south coast and the challenges that border officers face.
We have really seen some quite nasty scenes. We've had officers bitten, we've had officers hit, kicked in the head, or they don't want to be fingerprinted, or they don't want to be identified.
Good evening. The government has confirmed a new daily record of 1,295 migrants crossing the Channel to Kent in 27 small boats. Yesterday's total means just over 22,500 people have made the crossing so far this year, 10,000 more than at this time in 2021.
Almost all are relieved to have made it to safety and cooperate fully with Border Force staff. But tonight the Immigration Services Union says that in recent weeks its members have faced violence from people who do not want to be processed or identified on arrival. John Ryle has our report.
Lined up at Dover, some of the 27 boats that brought a record 1,295 migrants across the Channel yesterday. Women and children among them, but mostly single men. The Immigration Services Union says there's a disturbing new development: attacks on Border Force staff.
In the last few weeks, we have really seen some quite nasty scenes. We've had officers bitten, we've had officers hit, kicked in the head. As far as we're able to tell, they don't want to be moved. They don't want to be transported from where they've been landed to Manston, where they will be processed. Or they don't want to be fingerprinted, or they don't want to be identified.
And if the nature of the cross-channel trafficking trade is changing, so is the scope. Yesterday's boats, and more today, set off from multiple locations along 60 miles of the French coast.
Woohoo!
The controversial attempt to send migrants to Rwanda for processing and potential new lives there has been thwarted by legal challenges. So, what would Labour do?
The Rwanda policy has completely failed. The numbers speak for themselves, and it's indicative of systemic failure. And what Labour will do is they'll divert that funding into the National Crime Agency, establishing a cell that can actually smash the criminal gangs and stop them from operating.
Migrants arriving at Dungeness yesterday were handed drinking water by the refugee welfare group Care for Calais. It says creating legal, safe routes for migrants is the solution.
If we could offer visas for safe passage to genuine refugees from other countries in a similar way to the way we have done with Ukrainians. We haven't seen any Ukrainians getting in small boats. We haven't seen any Ukrainians paying people smugglers. So that shows that safe passage does work. It's a viable alternative.
Yesterday's record may well be broken this year, a year the government said would see post-Brexit Britain take back control of its borders.
Well, it is, of course, a hugely complicated issue. One former leader of UKIP says leaving the European Court of Human Rights is the only way forward. Let's go over to John Ryle in Dover for more.
Well, I'm joined now by Henry Bolton, a former leader of UKIP. Also, you've worked at a senior level in international border security. And you're calling for us to some extent, to walk away from international law.
Well, not from international law, let's be specific, the ECHR. And the reason I say that is because although the government has failed so far to put our border management into a properly strategic framework, operational, legal and so on, all coming together, all the different agencies working together, unity of effort and so on, ultimately the operational impact that we have on the borders comes to naught if our legal system is not free to make appropriate decisions relating to the UK's situation. And at the moment it's not. It really comes down to a fact that the ECHR operates on codified law, and in the UK we have a common law system. What I'm advocating is that we leave the ECHR, but we, of course, have to preserve human rights. We can do that within our own legal and legislative framework. We don't need the ECHR. There are other tools, other paths that we can follow. And that will help us to create the legislative framework to secure and manage our borders and to manage immigration correctly. particularly asylum cases and the appeals against deportations.
I mean, some will say breaking away from the European Court of Human Rights and breaking international law. Some will say it's a fine distinction.
Not at all, because actually the ECHR is not about international law as such. The ECHR was set up by the European states for a particular purpose. The problem is, although the UK was one of the initiators of the European Convention on Human Rights, we have, the European Union, if you like, has sent it down the route of codified law. It's a different legal system to the one we have here in the UK. I am not saying that we abrogate ourselves from international human rights principles, far from it. They need to be written into UK law firmly and clearly, but we do not want to be in a situation where a foreign court effectively is dictating whether or not we can or cannot deport somebody from our islands.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for that. So a wide range of views there, everything from detach ourselves from the European Court of Human Rights to, as Care for Calais is saying, establish safe and legal routes for migrants. As for the government's response to yesterday's record daily total, well, they say it's unacceptable. It's an abuse of the immigration system, and efforts to combat it will not be relented.
John Ryle in Dover there. In other news, a lorry driver who caused